crazy to be here because I've been, they totally erased me, Steve, as you're well aware. I mean, I thank God. I thank this audience. I mean, I thank Alex Jones for putting everything he's done in for 25 years to give me and build this platform. I thank Steve Pachinik for coming on this show and this show only with this information. I mean, this is just such a blessing. But Steve, if you hold over, Alex Jones, as soon as he heard Steve Pachinik break the huge news about the Trump sting, Alex Jones hopped in his race car. He's probably going about 160 miles per hour right now. He's probably on the phone with engineers trying to rig up like a car helicopter so he can get here faster and avoid traffic. So, Steve, please stay right there. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Pachinik, he's always reliable and unbelievable with his information. He's just the bombshell. President Trump set the sting trap for the Democrats to steal the election. Of course, they did it. What comes next? Steve Pachinik, Alex Jones coming up. This is the InfoWars War Room. We'll be right back. The fake news media today with Dr. Steve Pachinik giving us the inside scoop of President Trump's sting operation that is ongoing right now. The traps have been sprung. They keep stepping. It's like you walk into a room with mouse traps, and there's just mouse traps everywhere ready to go, and you got to get to the other side. Oh, I mean, they're just jumping mouse traps. They're setting mouse traps up. You got 30 attached to your body. So they're starting to get slowed down. But, I bet you President Trump was even aware of this, Dr. Pachinik, knowing how he operates and reads so much. The Washington Post printed this story in August of this year. Mail-in ballots were part of a plot to deny Lincoln re-election in 1864. So they've been doing this for over 100 years. And Trump always talks about Lincoln. So I wouldn't be surprised if Trump was even referencing this history when deciding to spring this trap, run this sting operation against them.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of Trump, but he makes allusions that people think are just jokes. And certainly the New York Times, or the phony New York Times, or whatever's left of the New York Times or the Post, it's ridiculous. They want to ridicule him. But when he said he's comparable to Lincoln, he was making a joke, but at the same time, he was cueing in his audience as to what he might or might not do. And one of the things that the opposition never understood about Trump is they don't really understand, in the nicest way possible, how Machiavellian his mind really is. In other words, it can span a wide range, and it can go in there in any way you want, and you're not going to know what happened. And that was, and still is, his genius. I was given the privilege of announcing this, but I don't know who else knows it. I don't know what else will happen. The truth of the matter is that your show was chosen, and you have the good or the benefit. And I hope this will result in a lot of arrests and the end of a problem.
Well, look, Steve, I hope America has the benefit. I want to be clear here, but let's get back to the issue. You know about regime change. What kind of power right now? What is the element here, or how much power does Trump have? Because nobody talks about this. Trump is still the president. Trump is the president of the United States. It seems to be a factor people forget. And he has the U.S. people behind him. Trump could have 50 million people in the streets tomorrow if he wanted to. What kind of power is that when we're here looking at this potential regime change, we'll call it that for lack of a better term, in this transfer period?
In philosophy, we have a statement that says, somewhat greater than which cannot be conceived. In other words, he has a lot of power, and that power will be implemented when he wants to. In turn, the press tries to describe him as highly circumscribed, that he has to depend on the House, on the Senate. Not really. He will assume far more power than anybody's seen before, to the benefit of the American public and getting our economy back in shape. He knew he made a mistake with the shutdown. He knew this coronavirus thing was nonsense, and the masks were just a shameful mark on our society. But that will all change. And in turn, he understood what you guys were about. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just a messenger. And I'm not the anointed messenger. There are those who are anointed. I'm not. I just happen to be somebody who's been around for a couple of regimes.
Steve, you just mentioned the lockdowns, the masks, the COVID nonsense. Of course, you called this out day one. You were on air with us back earlier in the year. InfoWars was again on the leading edge of that. But I'm curious now that we're looking at this in retrospect. We were all very frustrated. Did Trump, and I'm sure it was like a thorn in his side, did Trump put up with the COVID nonsense because he knew that this was coming and this was going to be bigger?
He put up with it. I can't tell you exactly his chain of thought. I knew if one would understand Trump, one would understand that from the very beginning, he understood that the Democrats had to reveal their own nefarious deeds. And he could talk about it, he could demonstrate it in the same way he allowed Fauci to come to his own downfall. And ironically, on your show, when I said a year ago or 2 years ago, get rid of Fauci, his retort was correct a couple of weeks ago when he said, I'm going to get rid of Fauci, but let me just get reelected. And now is not the right time. And he was right, now being the time when he was running for election. So my point to you is he does listen to the show. He does understand what's going on. I don't think he was being patronizing when he said to Alex in the very beginning. I remember when Alex said, I listen to you. Trump listens to him, and he's a patron. So I think this is more of a testimony to you guys, not so much to me, but to you guys. And you guys have done a great job, and Alex has done a great job, and you guys have done a great job. And that's why Trump really kind of selected you guys to carry the banner. And it's not an accident. When I said to you a while ago, I think the last show, when I said alternative media has become the mainstream, I wasn't kidding. And Alex said to me, well, how do I come to these conclusions? Well, number one, I'm not in the mainstream of anything, but I tend to be the black swan, as you guys are the black swan. But 20 years ago, I realized very quickly that an Alex Jones, whoever he might be or whatever he was, is a brilliant man who could understand and aggregate information very quickly and disseminate it in a way that people would understand it. At times somewhat comical, at times somewhat boisterous, and Trump could understand that, and Trump could identify with it. But beware the man who's silent. That is the caution I give.
Well, and I just look at this too. I mean, Trump was such a blessing from God, I guess you could say, to become our president, because he if all of this plays out and he says we'll be tired of winning. If all this plays out and he gets all these people caught and arrested, engaged in the theft, spying on his campaign, all the other stuff. By the way, the tea leaves read. I mean, Esper has just signed his resignation letter, so the tea leaves read. I mean, that means they know he wouldn't be signing that if he thought Biden was about to come in. I'll just put it that way. So, I mean, they see the tea leaves here.
I said years ago was to get rid of Esper and get rid of Mills. That was the first person I designated.
But do you think that's a sign that Trump has won this, that Esper's like, okay, Biden's not coming in, I'm out?
He understands what's coming down the road.
And Trump has said, I mean, get me reelected and we'll start looking at these people. I mean, Ray, Haspel. I mean, that's the swamp right now.
He has incredible staff. Grenell is one of these guys, just incredible. The DNI and the head of the CIA or the acting, he's just amazing. And he brought in just people who are amazing. And I've got to, give my kudos to the gay community who really supported Trump. And that was not in the mainstream, and people didn't realize that. But I knew very well that they were strong supporters and very vocal.
Oh, Steve, I couldn't even get a gay pride Trump hat. It was sold out. I'm serious. I wanted it was a cool hat. The rainbow, Make America, it's sold out.
I can't say anything.
I mean, I'm not saying I have a crush on Steve Pachinik. I'm just saying that I liked the Make America Pride hat is all I was saying there.
Oh, and I understand that the reality is this involved a cross-section of America. I'm just a simple messenger. This involved thousands of people who were in the White House, the State Department, the Homeland Security, the intelligence systems.
But that's what I was getting to, Steve. I mean, talk about the soft touch. I mean, because this is such a fragile thing. I mean, it's like, if you have to dust the glass menagerie, right? Like in the book, The Glass Menagerie, very soft. It's very fragile. I mean, if Alex Jones or I were to try to dust this thing, it'd be in thousands of pieces. I mean, Trump had the perfect touch, it seems.
Well, let me put it this way. Trump can modulate his temper and his tone accordingly. If you see what he does and you see how much he enjoys it, you can understand that this is a man who has a wide range of expression, understanding, and insights. What he allows you to believe or think, i.e., if he plays the fool and you believe he's the fool or the buffoon, then so be it for you. I mean, you're in trouble, because that's exactly where he
kind of
gets
like
you.
Obama, you'll never be president.
Well, that's the point. Obama was the real perversion of the system, because he was nothing more than a candidate that was brought out of the CIA. Not one word of anything about him was true. He wasn't involved in the Chicago elements. He was in the CIA. His mother was an operative in Indonesia. His grandparents on the maternal side were operatives. I mean, it was just nonsense. And at the same time, you had Biden, who was co-opting him as well. I mean, you talk about two idiots basically running the country and accomplishing nothing except the war in Iraq, Libya, Serbia, Somalia, Syria, Sudan. No one talks about that.
Yeah.
And the first thing Trump said, and why I was so proud of him, I'm taking troops out of Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq.
All right, Steve, stay right there. Alex is rushing in to talk to you. He's begging to talk to you. Dr. Steve Pachinek, what an incredible hour it's been with him. We're now hearing that President Trump is set to speak in about 30 minutes. So we'll obviously be tuned in, and we'll bring that live coverage to you as well. 5 more minutes with Dr. Steve Pachinek, who, again, ladies and gentlemen, has come on. Where has President Trump been? Why has he been silent? He's been sitting back and watching his sting operation against the Democrats' election theft play out. So that statement is coming up. We'll be covering it live. Steve, I want to ask you a final question here. Geopolitically on the world scale, obviously, when he meets with China and Saudi Arabia and all these other countries, I mean, they know how corrupt our politicians are, but it didn't necessarily affect their bottom line, so they just did business and they just said, okay. Well, Trump comes along, and I'm sure they've had the conversations like, hey, look, I'm not doing bad deals. I'm not taking your money. We're going to play it straight. And he's been going around the world doing it that way, but he had to kind of take care of some things here domestically first. How does the world respond to this? Because the whole world is watching America right now. So how does the geopolitical world respond to America finally cleaning out some of our corruption that's been corrupting the whole globe?
I think they're impressed. I'll be specific. There's no question that Vladimir Putin, who knows Trump very well and they're friends, knows exactly what he was doing. He understood what Trump did. He's probably laughing, saying this was a sting operation that the Democrats should have picked up. But Putin is a very close friend of Trump, and he's a close friend of America as Russia. President Xi, with all due respect, and the Chinese understand manipulation better than anybody. They probably admire what he do. They have respect for him. When Trump comes back in, you will see new agreements with China, North Korea, and other countries. And the one thing the Chinese always respect is intelligence and integrity. And the Chinese have had a long history of manipulation and the ability to con whatever they wanted. And right now, it's called guanxi. In Chinese, we deal with persons. And for them, it's a relationship between people. So they understood what Trump did. In terms of Europe, they're less important. I mean, Germany, Merkel is probably more surprised than anybody because Merkel didn't have a very high opinion of Trump. She's a PhD in nuclear physics. And the German leaders tend to be somewhat arrogant because she's an academic. As for the British, Boris Johnson likes him. He knows him. He's had COVID. He probably is smiling and laughing and saying, you know, there's something I could learn here. Macron, who's young, but he's nevertheless been an effective president, I'm surprised, but I'm happy for France, will also admire him for what he did. Spain and Italy, they don't have very much to say. The Middle East countries, in particular, Israel, Bibi will be absolutely delighted because he admires Trump. Trump has been an incredible power for Italy and for Israel and the Middle East. Saudi Arabia knows this very well. They'll admire Trump. UAE will admire Trump. Dubai will admire Trump. Oman will admire Trump. And my suspicion is you will have a peace treaty between Israel and Saudi Arabia soon. and there will be peace treaties with Israel and all the other Middle Eastern countries because of Trump's success and the success of his son-in-law and others in the White House. So, and overall, this is a positive for the United States. What happens is the world looks to America and understands, number one, that we are able to clean out our own mess. And that number two, when we do it, we just don't do it barbarically. We're not rounding up people. We're not throwing them in prison without due process. And the world actually, nation states admire when the leader of a nation state tends to be very clever, very judicious, quite patient, and very effective. And that's really how we can define the future of America for the next 8 years, because once Trump gets back in again, I suspect Pence will run, and then we will have about 4, 8, possibly 12 years in a row. So this is not just the next 4 years. We were playing for the next 8 to 12 years.
Steve Pieczenik, thank you so much. If you can figure out how to spell it, stevepieczenik.com. God bless you and God bless Steve. J. Trump is about to make his first statements from the White House press room since the Democrats got caught in their blatant all-out election theft. At least 5 states, maybe up to 7, they have been caught red-handed, engaged in election theft. What will President Trump say? We'll have the live coverage right here on the InfoWars War Room, brought to you by InfoWarsStore.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I haven't plugged today, barely. InfoWarsStore.com. So much big news is breaking. We care about the information, the content. We barely even pay the bills half the time around here. InfoWarsStore.com. Super election special is happening right now. DNA Force Plus, 50% off. Bodies, 50% off. These are 2 supplements in my daily regimen. I cannot recommend them enough. Don't forget about the T-shirts, the emergency food supplies, the emergency gear, the air filters, the water filters. It's all at InfoWarsStore.com. And again, folks, I'm banned everywhere. So I really do mean this from the bottom of my heart. And you just saw that guest, Dr. Steve Pieczenik, break that massive news, that huge story that we have the exclusive up at InfoWars.com right now. By the way, guys, if that story is up, can we flash that story on the screen here? Folks, I wouldn't have a platform. I'd be gone. I'd be a non-entity. I'd be a non-factor. But thanks to you, thank God for you shopping at InfoWarsStore.com. Here we are with the great crew and the great guests, still beating the mainstream news like a drum every day. So I cannot thank you enough. Now, the next great, amazing, unbelievable,